Princess Moonlight. Many years ago, there lived a poor old bamboo cutter, whose great sorrow it was that heaven had sent no child to cheer his wife and himself in their old age. Every morning he went into the woods in search of the lithe bamboo, which he would split lengthwise or cut into joints, and these he would take home with him, and his wife would turn them into useful or ornamental articles for the household, and sell them. While working at his task one day in a small grove of the slender trees that he had discovered, he was surprised by a soft, bright light which suddenly flooded the spot in which he was, and he was astonished to see that all this brilliance came from one bamboo. Marveling at the beautiful sight, he went to this bamboo stem, in the hollow of which was a tiny but exceedingly beautiful little girl, about 3 inches in height. "As I have found you here where lies my daily work," said the old man, "I must look upon you as a child sent from heaven." So very carefully, he took the exquisite little creature home to his wife, and both of them were filled with joy, because there was now a child come to them in a most marvelous manner, upon whom they could devote the love of their old age. And with the child came good fortune, for from this time the old man found gold and precious stones in the notches of the bamboos when he cut them up, so that before long he was rich enough to retire, and he built a fine house in which they all lived very happily. The bamboo child was no ordinary child, for in a very few months she was quite grown up, and so beautiful was she that the old people treated her like a princess, and allowed no one to see her or wait upon her but themselves. Her very presence made them happy, and no trace of sorrow could exist where she was. And wherever she might be, a beautiful, soft light made the place radiant. And so they called her Princess Moonlight, because they thought that only a daughter of the moon god could give forth such a soft, bright light. Of course, the fame of so lovely a princess spread far and wide, and many were the suitors who sought to win her hand. Not only from that country, but from foreign lands did they come, and the house was constantly surrounded by those who hoped to catch even a glimpse of her through the windows, or as she walked in the garden. But to none of them would the old man grant permission to address his adopted daughter, and at last all but 5 of them lost hope and departed to their homes. These 5 were very determined knights, whose ardor became the greater as their quest became the more difficult. They stood outside the garden walls in sunshine and rain, eating only such food as was brought to them. They wrote letters and verses to the princess, telling her of the great love for her, which prevented them from returning to their own homes, and even from taking rest and sleep. But no word did they receive from the princess. Winter and spring passed, and summer came, and still the knights watched and waited. They besought the old man to intercede for them, but he answered that he was not her real father, and that he could not order her to obey him, and also that he would not ask her to do anything she did not wish to do. At length the 5 knights returned to their homes, where they tried to forget Princess Moonlight, but this they could not do, so they again came to the bamboo cutter's house. This time they asked the old man to tell them if the princess was determined to never see any men. They begged him to say that their love for her was boundless, and asked for an opportunity to plead their cause. Now the old man would gladly have seen his lovely foster daughter married to one of these suitors, and he felt sorry for them. So he said to the princess, "Dear one, you know that I love you quite as much as though you were my real child, and that there is nothing I would not do to make you happy. I cannot live many more years, for I am already old, and it would be a great satisfaction for me to know that you are happily married before the time comes for me to die. Will you not consent to see these 5 brave knights, one at a time, and make up your mind which of them you will marry?" The princess replied that she could not love her own father any more than she loved him, and that her greatest wish was to please him. Still, she did not feel that she could see the 5 knights, even though assured that they were worthy, but would make one more trial of their love, and if they were successful in this, then she would grant their request. Each of them was to prove his love by bringing to her from a distant country something that she wished to possess. The bamboo cutter then went out to the 5 knights and told them what the princess had said, and all of them were satisfied, because the test given to each one would prevent jealousy between them. So the next day, Princess Moonlight sent word to the first knight that she wished him to bring her the stone bowl which had belonged to Buddha in India. The second knight was to go to the mountain of Horai in the eastern sea, and to bring her a branch of the wonderful jewel tree that grew on its topmost height. The third knight was to search through China for the fire rat, and to bring her its skin. The fourth knight was to find the dragon whose right eye was a many-colored stone, and to bring the eye to her. The fifth knight was to find the swallow which carried a shell in its stomach, and which lived in the Aegean Sea, and to bring her the shell. These tasks seemed to the old man to be so impossible of accomplishment that he didn't like to take the messages, but the princess refused to make any change in them, so he gave them to the knights word for word. The knights were so disheartened by the tests given them that they returned to their homes, resolved to forget the beautiful princess, but each found himself unable to do this, so before long they had all sent word that they were starting out on their respective quests. Now, travel in those days was not easy, but full of danger and difficulty, and the first knight lacked the courage to go to India. So he went to a temple in one of the large cities of Japan and bribed the head priest to let him take away a stone bowl which was on the altar there. He wrapped this up very carefully and, after waiting 2 years, took it to the old bamboo cutter. The princess received the package and unwrapped it, but saw at once that it was a sham, and not the bowl of Buddha, because it did not shine as the true one would have done. So she returned it to the knight and refused to see him. The second knight, with 12 skilled jewelers, went to an island he knew of, and there they designed a gold and silver branch which he was sure would satisfy the princess. To hold this branch he had his goldsmiths make a beautiful box, and when sufficient time had elapsed he took it to the bamboo cutter, asking him to tell the princess that here was the branch of the wonderful jewel tree that grew on the topmost height of Mount Horai. Princess Moonlight opened the box and took out the jeweled branch, but she saw at once that it was not what the knight stated it to be. And even as she was looking at it, the old man was summoned to the door by the 12 jewelers who had designed and made the beautiful thing, but who had not been paid for their work. The princess overheard their conversation with her foster father, and then directed that they be well paid for what they had done. They then went away, after thanking the princess for her kindness, but the knight returned to his home, a sadly disappointed man. The task of the third knight was to get the skin of the fire rat, whose virtue was that no fire could harm it. Now he had a friend who lived in China, and to him he wrote, offering him a very large sum of money if he would procure that which he desired. This friend was very willing to accept the knight's money, but wished to earn it without putting himself to any more trouble than was necessary. So he waited for quite a while, and then sent him the skin of an ordinary rat, also a message which told him of the hardships he had undergone in order to procure it. This skin the third knight took to the bamboo cutter, saying that he would wait outside the gate for the princess's answer. The princess took the package from the old man and said she would test the skin by putting it in the fire before consenting to see the knight. This she did, and of course the skin just crackled and burned up at once, so she knew it was a fraud. Thus the third knight failed to see her. The task of the fourth knight was to find the dragon whose right eye was a many-colored stone. But instead of seeking it himself, he called several of his retainers together and ordered them to search through China and Japan, and not to return unless they brought it with them. But they, having no idea of obeying what they considered to be an impossible order, merely used this as an excuse for taking a pleasant holiday. The knight waited a year, and no word came to him, so he decided to go himself. Taking 5 servants with him, he hired a ship and started for China. When but a few days out, they ran into a fearful storm, and before this abated, the ship was driven on shore. The knight now blamed the princess for the disaster, and his love turned to anger. It seemed to him that she had sent him on a mission of great danger, knowing it to be impossible to accomplish the task which she had set him. So he determined to give up all thought of winning the Princess Moonlight. The 5th knight was no more successful than was the 4th, so he too gave up the attempt. Reports of the wondrous beauty of the Princess Moonlight had reached the emperor, so he sent a messenger to her, summoning her to the royal palace. But the messenger was no more successful in seeing her than the 5 knights had been, in spite of the fact that it was the emperor's order. The princess told the bamboo cutter that she would vanish from the earth rather than go to the palace. So the messenger at last returned, and when the emperor heard that she would disappear from sight in preference to obeying his order, he made up his mind to go and see her himself. He therefore sent word to the bamboo cutter of his intention, forbidding him to say anything about his visit to his foster daughter. The next day, he set out with his retinue, which he left at a certain spot, and rode on alone. He reached the house, and the bamboo cutter opened the door for him. The emperor went straight to the apartment of the princess, and never had he even imagined such wondrous beauty as he saw when his eyes beheld the moon daughter. He at once fell madly in love with her, and begged her to come to the court and share his throne. But she refused, and said that if he attempted to force her to go to the palace, she would turn into a shadow, and this she did even as he looked at her. This filled him with fear, and he promised to leave her free if she would resume her former shape, to which she then returned. Then the emperor left, but night and day he thought only of the beautiful Princess Moonlight. Soon after this, the bamboo cutter and his wife noticed that the princess would sit on her balcony and gaze ardently at the moon, after which she would burst into tears. They asked her the reason for this, and she told them that she did not belong to this world, but came from the moon. And on the 15th day of this very month, her real parents would send for her, and she would have to go. It was the thought of leaving her kind foster parents and the home in which she had been so happy that made her weep. This made the old people and the princess's attendants very sad, for they all loved her, and the thought of losing her was a great blow to them. The news soon reached the emperor, who at once made plans to keep the Princess Moonlight on earth. When the 15th day of the month came, he had a guard of many thousands of warriors stationed all around the house and also on the roof, for it was his intention to make prisoners of the envoys of the moon, and to prevent the taking away of the princess, whom the bamboo cutter and his wife had hidden in an inner room. Orders were given that no one should sleep, and the strictest watch was to be kept. But the princess said that all of these measures were useless, for nothing could prevent her people from carrying out their purpose. She told the bamboo cutter and his wife how very sorry she would be to leave them, and that it was not her wish to leave them. It made her sad to think that she would not be able to make a return for all the love and kindness they had shown her. The harvest moon arose and flooded the earth with her beautiful golden light, and still nothing happened. The darkness of night had begun to make way for the gray dawn, and hope came to the anxious watchers, hope that the princess would not be taken away after all. Then, suddenly, a dark cloud seemed to leave the moon, and soon the sky was entirely obscured. It kept on its downward course until it reached within a few feet of the roof, and then stopped. Then did the watchers see a brilliant chariot, in which were beings who radiated light as did the princess. From the chariot stepped one who had the look of a king, and who trod the air as easily and as gracefully as though he were on hard ground. In a voice so clear that it was distinctly heard by every one of the awed watchers, he said, "Princess Moonlight, many moons ago you committed a grave fault, and for punishment were sent down to earth to live for a time. The bamboo cutter and his wife have taken good care of you, and to them we have given wealth. The time has come for you to return to your own people, so come at once from this lowly dwelling." Then, through the walls of the house was the princess seen, shining, bright, and of wonderful beauty. She kissed the old man and his wife, and spoke words of comfort to them, saying that her heart was full of love for them, and that she was leaving them against her own will. The emperor also she bade goodbye. Then she was transported through the air to the chariot, which mounted swiftly towards the moon. And now came the morning light, and no trace of the moon chariot was left to those who gazed upwards with tearful eyes, and with a full heart the emperor ordered his warriors to return. Sorrowful as were the old bamboo cutter and his wife, yet were they full of gratitude for having known the love of a daughter who, while not with them in the body, would always dwell with them in spirit.